You did everything they said would set you free. You cracked open the silence inside you, pulled your truth out of hiding, and stripped yourself bare of every mask you once wore just to be accepted. You stood face to face with your own fears, wrestled your shadow until you could breathe through it, and finally walked into the world as your unfiltered self, raw, honest, awake. You thought liberation would feel like applause. You thought they'd admire your courage, welcome your clarity, and love you for finally becoming someone real. But instead, something eerie starts to happen. The atmosphere changes the moment you enter a room, as if the air itself holds its breath. Laughter dims, chatter shortens, shoulders stiffen, and eyes dart like they're trying to avoid something they can't quite name. You feel it in your gut, that invisible fracture between you and them, that subtle exile wrapped in politeness. A part of you wonders if you're overthinking it. Maybe it's paranoia, maybe you're reading too much into it. But then again, weren't you told that truth was beautiful? That honesty builds bridges? That authenticity is what everyone's been dying to find. And yet, now that you've arrived with nothing but your truth, why does it feel like you just became the problem? But no one told you the dark side of dropping the act. No one warned you that authenticity isn't always met with applause, but resistance. The moment you stop pretending, you become a mirror, one that reflects not flattery, but truth. And most people don't want to see that. They don't hate you, they recoil from what your presence reveals in them. You used to be easy to digest, the agreeable one, the peacekeeper, the background character who asked for nothing and fit neatly into their expectations. You were the steady hand in the chaos, the pleasant echo in their narrative, the one who knew how to shrink yourself to keep the room comfortable. But now you've become disruptive. You've stepped out of their script and started reading your own lines, and in doing so, you've broken an unspoken pact, the one where everyone silently agrees to keep the illusion alive. Now you're no longer asleep in the dream they all agreed to share. You no longer nod along just to keep the peace. You no longer smile through discomfort or sugarcoat your truth to avoid making others squirm. You say what others are too afraid to admit, not to provoke, but because silence feels like self-betrayal. You call things what they are. You feel what others spend their lives avoiding. And with every word you speak, every boundary you uphold, every truth you refuse to bury, you shake the ground they built their lives on. Your energy doesn't just enter a room, it alters it. You no longer fit inside their unspoken rules. Your presence feels like pressure. Your honesty cuts through the fog. Even your stillness speaks like thunder. You've become a disruption in the system, unmanageable, uncontainable, unreadable, and in a world addicted to comfort and conformity, that kind of realness is not admired, it's feared. So they start to pull away, not with drama, but with quiet hesitation. Suddenly, they're too busy. The texts slow down, the invitations stop coming, plans are postponed indefinitely, and yet, when you ask, they smile and say, nothing's wrong, but you can feel it. The energy has shifted. The air between you carries a strange coldness, a rehearsed politeness that wasn't there before. The warmth is gone, replaced by a calculated distance. They won't confront you, not directly. That would require self-awareness. Instead, they retreat behind excuses and empty gestures, hoping you won't notice the space widening. This is what happens when you wake up in a room full of people still pretending to sleep. This is the quiet punishment for daring to be yourself, for choosing self-alignment over social approval. Picture this: you're sitting at dinner, surrounded by familiar faces, but something feels off. The conversation dances in circles, jokes that aren't funny but get polite laughs, gossip disguised as concern, and half-hearted dreams tossed around like background music no one really listens to. But something in you has changed. You're no longer entertained by empty noise. You don't force a laugh just to keep the rhythm going. You don't nod along to rumors that feel like poison wrapped in politeness. And when someone asks, "How are you?" you don't default to the robotic, "I'm fine." You pause. You answer honestly. And suddenly, everything freezes. Forks stop midair. Smiles falter. The air becomes thick with discomfort, not because you were inappropriate, but because you broke the spell. You violated the silent agreement everyone made. We keep things shallow here. We perform. We don't make each other feel too much. Your honesty didn't just fill the room, it exposed it. It wasn't your honesty that offended them, it was what your honesty revealed. You didn't break the rules of kindness, you disrupted the rituals of denial. As Carl Jung once said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but most people aren't looking for understanding. They're looking for comfort, for validation, for mirrors that flatter rather than reveal. When you speak without filtering, when you show up without the expected costume, you don't just say something true, you become something threatening. Your presence interrupts their performance. You break the rhythm they rely on to stay numb. And suddenly, you're no longer just a person at the table. You're a living question mark they can't ignore. Why are you still pretending? Picture a room where every person wears a mask, not out of ignorance, but agreement. Everyone knows the rules. Don't be too honest. Don't be too raw. Don't disturb the collective performance. It's not truth that keeps the peace. It's uniformity. Then you walk in, bare-faced, unapologetic, and suddenly, the comfort of pretense turns into tension. You don't even have to speak, they feel it. The weight of their own disguises becomes unbearable, but instead of questioning the mask, they question you. Are you too intense? Too deep? Too much? First, they dismiss you with jokes disguised as concern. You've changed. Why so serious lately? It's not curiosity, it's containment. They want to stuff you back inside the costume you burned, and when that fails, they escalate. Eye rolls, whispered sarcasm, and jokes that are never just jokes. Suddenly, your clarity becomes arrogance, your growth becomes a phase, and your truth becomes a punchline. Not because you're wrong, but because you've become the mirror they can't look into without seeing the cracks in themselves. Watch their eyes closely. Not their words, not their smirks, but their eyes. That's where the truth leaks out. Behind every casual dismissal is a flicker of tension they can't quite hide. Behind the laughter at your expense is something heavier, an anxiety, a flash of envy, a quiet panic they can't name. They mock what they secretly crave. They sense that you've touched something they haven't dared to reach, the real self beneath all the roles, and that terrifies them, because deep down, they know they're exhausted from pretending. They know that behind the curated posts and polite conversations, there's a version of themselves they've locked away and forgotten how to access, and at 2 a.m., when everything is quiet and no one is watching, they catch glimpses of it, and it haunts them. But to admit that the life they built might be made of masks and borrowed identities, that would unravel everything. So instead of facing it, they turn on you, the one who stopped pretending, the one who reminds them of what they've buried. They won't confront you head on, they're too afraid to. So instead, they aim for something vaguer, something safer, your meaning. They twist your growth into arrogance. You've changed, they say, as if change were a crime. You think you're better than everyone, as if confidence is condemnation. Why are you always so serious? You used to be more fun, but these aren't critiques of who you are. They're confessions about who they're not ready to be. Every word they fling at you is really aimed at the parts of themselves they've rejected. These aren't insults, they're projections, shadows trying to speak. You didn't hurt them, you simply stopped lying with them. And now, your truth makes their denial impossible to ignore. The moment you stop performing, your existence becomes offensive, not because you're cruel, but because you're free. Your authenticity doesn't just speak, it accuses. Without trying, you expose what they've buried. Your clarity makes their confusion harder to hide. Your liberation makes their self-imposed cages feel smaller. Your truth walks into the room like a spotlight, and they flinch. Is it harsh? Absolutely, but it's the kind of harsh that peels away illusion. And once you recognize this, you stop blaming yourself. You stop shrinking to ease their discomfort, because it was never really about you. It was about the discomfort you stirred in them, the dormant truth you accidentally woke up. When your unfiltered presence enters their carefully managed world, it doesn't just make them uncomfortable, it shakes something deeper. They don't feel socially awkward, they feel existentially exposed. Authenticity, real and raw, has a strange effect. It spreads, it fractures their inner walls, it pokes at the persona they've spent years curating, and when their mask begins to tremble under the weight of your truth, they panic. But instead of naming the fear, they project it. They reach for convenient labels. You've changed, you're being dramatic, you're isolating yourself. This isn't you. They say these things not because they see you clearly, but because they no longer recognize themselves in your presence. And here's the irony, They think they're attacking you, but they're actually confessing. Each insult is a leak from their own unconscious, a signal that your authenticity has stirred something they've desperately tried to silence. And then it hits, the loneliness, not the kind that comes from isolation, but the kind that creeps in when you realize most people were only ever connected to your mask, not your soul. People begin to drift, not because you changed for the worse, but because your truth became too loud for their comfort. You didn't push them away. They just couldn't stand the silence you brought into the noise. The surface-level banter, once enough to fill a room, now feels empty, like chewing on dust. Every sentence scripted, every smile practiced. And when you've tasted real connection, when you've dared to speak from the marrow of your being, those hollow exchanges start to feel like starvation. You find yourself choosing solitude, not because you hate people, but because you crave something real. You'd rather sit alone in your own silence than drown in a room full of masks pretending to be faces. Welcome to the in-between, the valley of authenticity. It's not a destination, it's a reckoning. It's that strange, silent terrain where the old version of you has crumbled, but the new world hasn't arrived yet. You're no longer blind enough to walk with the sleepwalkers, but not yet sure where the awakened ones are hiding. It's disorienting, isolating, beautiful in its clarity and brutal in its silence. This is where the real test begins, because here, in the quiet echo of your own becoming, the temptation to betray yourself returns in a different form, not as fear, but as longing, the longing to belong, to be accepted, to just fit somewhere again. And so the voice creeps in. Maybe I was better off before. Maybe honesty costs too much. Maybe it's safer to wear the mask and nod along, because at your core, you're still human, wired to connect, built to be seen. And when that connection feels impossible, even the illusion of acceptance can feel like relief. This is the shadow that lurks in truth's light, the seduction of conformity disguised as peace. But don't forget the true price of fitting in. It's not just the mask, it's the slow erosion of your soul beneath it, that quiet suffocation of shrinking yourself day after day, smiling when you want to scream, agreeing just to be included. It's not living, it's a slow-motion disappearance, and eventually, you realize, solitude, as cold and unforgiving as it can be, is still more honest than the crowded spaces where no one sees you. At least when you're alone, you're not lying to yourself, you're not shape-shifting for approval, you're not betraying your own voice just to keep someone else comfortable. In that emptiness, you meet the only person who's never left, you, and that relationship, raw and unfiltered, becomes sacred. That's the paradox. The pain of being alone births the power of truly belonging to yourself. One real connection, especially the one you build within, is worth more than 1,000 surface-level performances. This is the crucible of authenticity, the fire that doesn't just burn away the false, but reveals what's gold beneath it. And if you can stand the heat, something radiant waits on the other side, the kind of life that can only grow where lies once withered. But there's a deeper twist, one most never see. Authenticity, when left unchecked, casts its own shadow. Just because you're done performing doesn't mean you're done hiding. Sometimes, what we call being real is just another role, the role of the brutally honest, the unfiltered truth teller, the awakened one among the blind. And in that role, truth can become a weapon, not a gift. I don't do fake turns into a declaration of war against vulnerability. I just speak my mind starts sounding more like a license to harm than a commitment to clarity. I've done my work becomes a pedestal, a way to feel superior to those still learning. And without realizing it, the very authenticity you fought so hard to claim morphs into a mask made of pride. It looks honest, it sounds powerful, but it hides the same fear of being seen, not as enlightened, but as still unfinished. True authenticity doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't need to declare its depth or prove its strength. It simply says, I'm still becoming. It carries the quiet humility to admit that even in your honesty, you sometimes hide, that sometimes you dress your truth in armor to avoid being pierced. That even now, there are parts of you you're afraid to show. Authenticity isn't perfection. It's the courage to stay soft in a world that rewards sharp edges. It knows that vulnerability isn't a weakness to be cured. It's a doorway to connection. And without compassion, truth becomes cold. Without humility, honesty becomes performance. Without kindness, realness becomes nothing more than rawness. a wound mistaken for wisdom. If you catch a hint of defensiveness hiding inside your truth, a sharp edge in your light, maybe you're still performing too, just on a different stage, and that's not weakness, that's awareness. That's the real work, because true awakening isn't about arriving. It's about recognizing the shadow that walks beside your clarity. It's about catching yourself when you're using honesty to dominate instead of connect, when you're more focused on proving you're real than understanding someone else's fear. It's about softening, not hardening. Real growth whispers, "I'm not above this. I'm inside it." It humbly admits that even the awakened self has blind spots, that even the person who's shed their mask still carries echoes of the old performance. The authentic one is not the finished one, they are simply the one brave enough to keep becoming. So how do you carry yourself through all of this? First, understand this: rejection isn't always rejection. Sometimes, it's revelation. It shows you who's willing to evolve beside you, and who can only function around the version of you that stayed small. Their distance isn't proof that you've gone too far. It's proof that they can't follow where you're going. Depth isn't a competition. It isn't about who's more enlightened or who's done more work. It's about energy meeting energy. Truth recognizing truth. Second, realize their coldness, their criticism, their discomfort. It's not really about you. It's about what's rising inside them, what you stirred, what they're not ready to face. Their resistance is a symptom of inner fear, the fear that they, too, will have to confront their own illusions if they stay close to your truth. And when you see that, you don't need to retaliate. You don't need to feel superior. You simply soften, because real authenticity doesn't seek to prove, it seeks to understand. Third, keep your gaze turned inward. Keep checking your own mirror. Are you truly being honest, or are you using honesty as a blade? Are you silent out of peace, or are you withholding out of quiet resentment? Are your truth bombs really truth, or are they veiled acts of aggression dressed as self-awareness? The danger of awakening is that it can so easily become its own theater. You shed one mask only to unconsciously craft another, the mask of the real one, the enlightened one, the honest one. But truth doesn't need props. Real authenticity isn't a role to master. It's a space you return to, again and again, with humility. The moment you start performing your awakening, you've already stepped away from it. Fourth, gather your tribe slowly, intentionally. Don't chase connection out of loneliness. Build it out of resonance. Let the silence of the valley shape your discernment. Learn to sit with yourself so fully that you're no longer desperate to be seen, only eager to be understood. Don't rush to the summit just to escape the quiet. The people who belong in your life will not fear your depth, they'll match it. Let solitude be your compass, not your curse, because real connection isn't built on noise. It's found in recognition. Don't count followers, feel for frequency. Choose souls, not crowds. One true mirror is worth more than 1,000 spectators. And finally, never forget this: authenticity isn't a finish line you cross. It's a rhythm you learn to dance with for the rest of your life. It's not about reaching some perfected state where every word is wise and every step is certain. It's about showing up, again and again, with an open heart and the willingness to tell the truth, even when your voice shakes. It's the bravery to be seen as you are, flaws and all, without performing for praise. It's the quiet strength of shining not to impress, but to illuminate, not to be admired, but to be real, to walk the path not paved with applause or validation, but with self-trust, integrity, and grace. Authenticity isn't about getting it all right. It's about staying true, even when no one's clapping, and that is philosophy in motion. Not a rigid pursuit of answers, but a living, breathing unraveling of the self. It's the quiet courage to strip away illusions, not to arrive at certainty, but to discover deeper, more meaningful questions. It's the sacred act of staying open, of leaning into mystery instead of demanding resolution, to live not with conclusions, but with curiosity, to treat every layer peeled back as an invitation to go further, not to be finished. This is the real path, one of wonder, of rawness, of becoming, forever evolving, forever deepening, forever awake. And now, that's your journey.